Comrade Lynn, what is NHI and how will it work?
Okay, so NHI is basically a financing model. So, in fact, we need to analyze why we have an NHI model. NHI is going to help us achieve something that we call universal health coverage, so UHC. So NHI then is going to be the financing mechanism that's going to allow us to reach universal health coverage.
Okay, and then can you give us more details on how it came about and yeah.
Okay, so basically this is it's an age-old topic, and it was formulated from the National Development Plan, where government saw the need that more and more people need to access quality healthcare. So we know that healthcare is an expensive thing, so for there to be more and more people to access quality healthcare, we need to come up with some sort of financing mechanism to make sure that we can actually pay for the healthcare. So that's what NHI is, that's why it was designed, and that's what it's meant to implement.
Now, what is the difference between NHI and the current private medical aid schemes that exist in South Africa? What is the difference between the two?
Okay, so with your medical aid scheme, so any person who wants to purchase health insurance via private medical health scheme, you pick up your phone call, you contact your MedShield, your Discovery, and you basically find a package that best suits you. Now, what you'll know is that that's an expensive exercise. So one person for complete coverage, that could be anything between 3,000 Rand to 7,000 Rand a month. That's for health insurance to cover one person. So by pure virtue of the people that we are, by pure virtue of where we live in this country, where more than half of the people in this country live in poverty, that's unrealistic, that's unsustainable. Not a lot of people can pick up the phone and find themselves being covered by medical aid insurance. So that's why there's a need for NHI. NHI is going to cover everybody, but we'll also discuss the issue of financing later on.
Okay, so you were saying that, or maybe let me put it this way, you were saying that with NHI, any person, any South African citizen can be able to go to public hospitals,
yes,
and access quality health care.
Yes.
With that said, one of the points mentioned in the white paper is that it will provide comprehensive quality health care. Now, what exactly is that?
Comprehensive quality health care, it means that any individual in this country, as long as you are a South African citizen, you can walk into a public health care facility and your needs can be attended to. You can receive the quality health care that you need for you to live a healthy life. You see, the issues with NHI is that we need to get rid of this notion that quality health care is something that is meant for the rich. It needs to cut across all barriers. Whether you're a woman, you need to access gynecology services, you can access them. Whether you are sickly, you have some sort of renal failure, or whatever the medical condition is, despite your age, despite your race, despite your gender, you can walk into a public health facility and you can acquire what you need for you to be able to live a healthy and long life.
A worker might be asking, we have a system currently where citizens can go to public hospitals and get services now. What difference or what changes will the NHI be bringing from the current system that we have?
First of all, we need to acknowledge something very important. We have the most unequal, the most skewed health service industry or sector in the whole world in this country. What I mean by that is that out of GDP, the budget that is allocated to health in this country is 8.5%, okay? The 5% is dedicated to your private facilities, okay? Only 3.5% comes to public health facilities. Now, it wouldn't be an issue if there was a 50-50 split between your public health care, private health care. The problem here that persists in this country is that only 16 to 18% people hold medical aid insurance. And the rest of the 82% to 84% have to go to a public health facility. Now, that on its own creates a huge problem. It creates a huge mass problem for your public health institutions. This is why there is undersupply in most public health places. There is a lack of infrastructure, there is a lack of access to your medication that you need for your different ailments. There is right now with the doctors and nurses, they are overworked because of the mass loads that they have to encounter on a day-to-day basis. I mean, who works for a 36-hour? They say it's 36-hour daily, but there are only 24 hours in a day. That's the situation that public health workers are having to deal with in a public setup, which is completely different to a private setup. So that is why we're saying that NHI is of the utmost importance, because we need to address this issue of the skewness. We need to balance things out so that it does not matter whether you're going to a public healthcare or a private healthcare, you need to be able to access quality healthcare.
Okay, now, so with the introduction of NHI, what's going to happen to the medical aid schemes? Are they going to be open to work with the public hospitals, or are they still going to remain separate?
Okay, now that is probably the biggest cause of contention. There is this whole struggle that's happening. There's a system that is currently working, that is currently set in place. We've identified and we've said on and on that it's unequal, it doesn't work, and it disadvantages the poor. Now, the white paper, and something that's so controversial about the white paper is that it makes no room for medical aid. It's actually suggesting that medical aids and medical aid schemes, we need to get rid of them because they have not worked and they've only been able to address the needs of a few. So in order for us to achieve universal health coverage as it has been designed, so that each and every person, no matter who you are, where you reside, as long as you're a South African citizen, you can access this healthcare, there's going to be need for there to be no medical health care. However, with that said, we also need to take into consideration that there are those people, even if there's going to be an NHI, who are still going to feel the fact that they need some sort of private help. I think maybe that's where medical aid schemes can feature, but as the white paper dictates, there's no need for the average person, the average working class person and a poor person to still want to access a medical aid insurance.
So in essence, what you're saying is that although NHI will be there, private medical aid schemes will still exist separately.
For those who still feel the need to pay out of pocket over and above what an NHI provides. Because what actually is going to happen here is that with this whole NHI, public facilities will be recapacitated. So the idea is that we must improve the quality that goes to the public health sector. We're going to give them we're going to supply them with what they need. We're going to give them the necessary infrastructural development to make sure that they can compete with the private sector. So that when you and I look at the difference between public and private, we can still say, but there's no need for me to take a medical aid insurance. I can still access the same thing in the same quality from the public healthcare. So basically what NHI is going to do is going to give us a better choice, other than what's the case right now where you are forced to take a medical aid.
You mentioned earlier about the allocation of the budget for public and private hospitals, which brings me to the question of funding for the NHI project. How will this be funded, and will direct tax increases be considered for this?
Okay, so the issue of funding, it's still in a developmental phase. What our department has done of late is to propose a funding mechanism that works for the working class. So these issues are still debated, they're still talked about. There's nothing really set in stone because, I mean, something as huge as overhauling the whole health sector, it needs time for us to debate all these issues. So what basically is going to be done is that government is going to continue to finance health insurance, the national health insurance, that is. So that 8.5%, ideally all of it should go to funding NHI. Nothing has been set in stone, but ideally that entire 8.5, as the government puts money aside for health, that should all go to NHI. With regards to taxes, like I said, it's still being debated. People are still doing their calculations, adding and subtracting, trying to figure out what's going to be best moving forward. Taking into consideration that we are the most unequal country in the world, we do not want to put tax burdens on the working class and the poor. So things like value-added tax are not going to be considered because it is very much regressive in nature. Things that need to be looked into are issues of a wealth tax. Those who are rich should redistribute their income in such a way that it benefits those who are poor. Things like levies on financial transactions, things that are not really taxed as yet. Your currency movement, those things should be taxed. So things like that, slowly and surely, they're looking at ways of earmarking those things towards the implementation of NHI. But in our discussions as we engage, we are looking at ways to make sure that there isn't a tax burden on the working class.
With that said, there have also been some points mentioned in the white paper that those who will be accessing NHI will depend on how much you earn. And won't that also factor in the fact that others will be discriminated because I earn so much money that I can't really access it, I'm going to have to pay a certain portion towards it. Can you clarify that?
Okay. The issue of contributions when it comes to NHI and depending on the idea here, and it's a developmental idea, is that those who can pay should when it comes to contributions into the NHI. So there isn't going to be a cap per se to say that you earn so much money, therefore you cannot use an NHI. No, we said that it's going to be universal healthcare. So all people, no matter who you are, you as a South African citizen, you have the right to access healthcare. So there isn't going to be a cap per se to say that if you earn this amount of money, you cannot access. No. We are driving ourselves towards universal health coverage. But it's going to be a case where those who can contribute should contribute. Also think about it in this way. If we are getting rid of the burden of having to take care of a payment to a medical health insurance, surely there is enough money to still contribute a small portion for NHI.
That's debatable. So what you're saying is that NHI will be free to a certain extent. It won't completely be free.
Well, nothing is for free. Let's take into consideration how expensive healthcare is. Nothing is for free. But the way NHI is going to be designed, the way it is structured, is that it's going to look at pooling all these resources, all these things that they've earmarked as possible strategies or possible designs to make sure that we can finance this. All these small little pots of gold that they've identified to be pooled into one pool. So that what happens in that case is that the risk associated with financing becomes small because we've taken all these different revenue streams and put them into one pot to finance NHI.
Now, lastly, correctly, a worker watching this might be asking, I'm getting free public health care right now, and why do we need NHI? And why is Cosatu supporting the call for its implementation?
Yeah. That might be the case for a worker who lives, first of all, near a public health facility. Let's not forget that there are people who live in regions where the nearest healthcare center is miles away. What are we saying about that person? Okay, it might be convenient for you that you can access healthcare when you want, however you want, but let's also look at the broader picture here. Healthcare needs to be a right more than it is a commodity, because it literally is at where we are right now, it's being sold to the highest bidder. We need to get rid of that. So yes, maybe it's easy for Lebogang to get into her car and drive to the nearest Laratong, the nearest Baragwana,
And it's free.
and be able to access your healthcare and be able to have your medication. There are people with chronic illnesses who don't have that benefit. What are we saying about those people? Okay, we need to get ourselves into the point where we adopt, they call it an Ecuadorian principle, that says that we need to create strategies that not only benefit our generation, but 2, 3, and 4 generations after ourselves. Okay, it may be easy and it may be efficient for you to get to a public health center. What about in the next 4 generations? when most doctors will have decided that it's more profitable to ply my trade in the private health sector, and they leave an even smaller pool of doctors that are available right now. You know, in the health profession on its own, only 29% of health professionals ply their trade in the public sector. So in 4 generations to come, what will that number be? So just as it's efficient and easy for you right now, let's think about the next generation, and the next generation.
In closing, what contribution is Cosatu making to this project?
We're doing a lot of things. Among our contributions are those of the Davis Tax Committee. Recently, we formulated a funding model in which we want to give a voice to the workers, basically. Issues of maybe another organization will say, oh, well, let's just increase VAT to finance this NHI. So it's important for Cosatu to come back and say, listen, no. Workers and the poor, they cannot finance that through that. So with our interactions, with most colloquiums and most discussions that happen with regards to NHI, we're present. We're making our voice heard to say that workers need to be taken into consideration with regards to policies that are being drafted so that we can achieve universal health coverage.